Hi, and welcome to the OT is In, the podcast where we merge the worlds of education and occupational therapy to empower families like yours. I'm Sarah Collins, your host, an occupational therapist and a homeschooling parent. I've experienced occupational therapy by supporting families for over 15 years, but also through seeking out support of my own children, so I'm right here in the trenches with you. Though there is not one way to educate your child, there is a lot to consider when individualizing an education. And the goal of this podcast is to explain some of the why behind what an occupational therapist is thinking so you can apply it to your own family. Especially with my three favorite topics: executive functioning, handwriting, and sensory processing. Each episode will be packed with practical tips, expert interviews, and real-life stories aimed at helping you to create a supportive learning environment for your child. So, grab your headphones and get ready to dive in of the collision of education and occupational therapy. I'm Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, and I'm thrilled to have you with me on this journey of discovery. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. In today's episode, we are thrilled to have the incredible Julie Bogart joining us. Julie is a prolific author and expert in writing education. She shares her journey from growing up with an award-winning author as a mother to navigating the world of professional writing and homeschooling. We delve into the unique ways that professional writers teach writing, contrasting it with traditional school methods that focus heavily on mechanics over the creative content of children's writing. Julie highlights the importance of valuing children's thoughts in writing and teaching them to express their unique ideas. We also explore how current technologies like ChatGPT can influence the writing process and the significance of maintaining a strong sense of personal voice amidst these changes. So join us as we uncover how to inspire both young and mature minds to preserve, articulate, and cherish their thoughts through writing. Plus, hear about Julie's latest book, Help My Kid Hates Writing, and her insights on homeschooling and education. So whether you're a parent, educator, or a writing enthusiast, this episode promises to offer valuable techniques and inspiring reflections nurturing these budding writers. Hey, and welcome back to the OT is In podcast. Today, I am so honored to have Julie Bogart here with us. So Julie and I have met at conferences, and then she hosted me on her podcast. I actually think, was that 2022? Do you know?
Yeah, it might be. It's been a little minute.
It
Yeah.
has been a minute. That's right. But I was just telling her before this that there are still people finding Homeschool OT through that podcast. So
I
it
love
is
that.
a good one. I will make sure that it's linked here in the show notes. But Julie, before we go any farther, just in case there are people that don't know who you are, can you share a little bit about that and like who you are, what your story is, how it all comes together, where you are writing bazillions of fantastic books now?
Oh my gosh, the timing of that question is so unique or interesting because I owe so much of who I am today to my mother. She was a published author of over 70 books, an award-winning author, sold over 2 million copies in her lifetime. And I grew up with this just environment where writing was very natural. It was centered on what I wanted to say, and what I wanted to say mattered to somebody.
Mhm.
And so my mother has been a role model. And I remember when I was young, in college and beyond, I would raid her bookshelves for the books she used to help her own writing career. And I would read those. And
Wow.
it was in the late 90s when I was homeschooling my kids that I started doing freelance work. I worked as a ghostwriter. I used to edit these doctoral dissertations for people who were trying to get their PhDs. That was a great job. I loved that. And so I was a magazine editor. I did technical writing. And as my kids got older, I had friends who said, I know that you freelance write. Could you help us teach our kids to write? And it was about that time that I discovered that writing programs really didn't understand writing. It was professional writers who understood writing. And when they would teach it to adults, they used a completely different strategy than what adults use to teach children. But my experience with my own kids was that the way professionals teach writing works better with kids than the way school teachers teach it. So that really kicked off my relationship with the homeschool space and writing. And then, interestingly, my own mother, who's been such an integral part of my life, died on New Year's Day this year. And my current brand new book, Help My Kid Hates Writing, is the only thing of mine she's never read. And yet
Ooh.
she's like on every page. It's
And
such
it,
a strange, it's like
yeah,
she died and her
surreal.
legacy is living
Yeah.
on in this book that she didn't read. Isn't that
Isn't that
weird?
beautiful? It's
Yeah.
beautiful. Mm.
Yeah. So that's how it all got started.
Yeah. So, what is the biggest difference in how writers teach writing and how they are teaching kids to write now?
So, when school teachers or the educational establishment designs curriculum, a lot of times they get focused on measurable outcomes. So, they want to make sure a child knows how to spell, punctuate, use proper
Hmm.
grammar. They want to make sure a child's introduced to age appropriate formats. And those are very easy to grade. Like it's either spelled correctly or incorrectly.
Or
There's not a
not,
lot
right?
of, yeah, more often than not, there's not a lot of variation that you can get away with. And so teachers know how to measure that, and school is about measurement. When we're talking about the content of writing, the more subjective side, the ideas, the stories, the opinions of a human brain, now you're in a more subjective territory that requires a little bit more nuance and support. And a lot of times, the way school treats that is it's secondary to the mechanics. It's almost like you don't really have a right to be read and well understood until you can perform on these sort of mechanics standards, right? If you can spell and punctuate, now I'll read you. Now I'll give what you have to say
Your
a
words
little
don't matter
more.
until then.
Yeah, yeah. And you see it
Mhm.
even in very ironic moments, like a child sends a handwritten thank you note to grandma, and she calls the mother, her own daughter, to say, why doesn't Johnny know how to spell celebration? And you're like, but did you see that your child is saying your present helped the celebration?
And is really trying to get this across to you.
That's right. We tend to treat the mechanics as though they're the gatekeeper for our thoughts. The
Yeah,
way professional writers treat writing is the inverse of that. They look at the person and they're not like, did you spell correctly? Because an editor and a copy editor is going to catch all that.
right.
They're looking at, what do you have to say? Are you saying anything worth reading? Are you saying anything unique or fresh or insightful about this topic? Because why? Because they're trying to sell their writing. So just
Yes,
accurate mechanics does not get you in a magazine
right.
or get you a book contract or grow your Substack list. The writing itself has to be compelling. So what professional instructors do with these paying customers who want to grow as writers is they do not berate them. They do not grade them. They do not tell them that they're doing a poor job. They major on helping that person give the message they so want to give. And they do it through affirmation, support, and generating new ideas. And to be fair, my mother, when she was raising me, I was in public school. So I was
Right.
getting the public school education. But when I would have a writing assignment, and there was a handful of them that I remember very well, she coached me. She didn't edit me. She didn't talk down to me. She didn't get discouraged by me. There was always this collaborative edge. And I
Oh,
just
great.
brought that forward into my work.
I will never forget. So, my son and we talked about this in the podcast that we were on, but then also several times he back in the OT is in. And the turning point for us was when we started doing Jot It Down. When he would come in and tell me something, and I would say, oh my gosh, I need to write this down so that I can remember it later or so that I can read it to daddy or whatever. And it made it so that he realized that the thoughts in his head corresponded to the words that were on the page. Like that connect was not even there until we started doing it. And then from there, we progressed to him copying it and moving on from just beautiful things. But he needed that even to know that his thoughts and words were the same thing.
Yes, 100%. Everyone needs to know that, in
Yeah.
fact. And part of what is tricky about the way writing is often taught is that kids think the thoughts they're supposed to put on the page are living in someone else's brain. They think they're
Mm-hmm.
living in the teacher's brain. They're living in the answer key. They're living in
Yep.
whatever a third grader should already know, like in this weird standard, instead of recognizing that writing is literally just the act of transcribing your thoughts. And your thoughts can be anything. Those
Yeah.
thoughts can be things like, I hate writing. This is really hard. I don't want to do this right now. The topic is stupid. That's all valuable to transcribe because it helps you hook up a brain with a hand. And just to your
Yes.
point, I have a granddaughter who just turned 5. And the other day, her father, my oldest son, said to me, "Oh my gosh, Lavender is writing multiple books a day right now." And I started laughing because that is so my son, right? Like Lavender can't read. She
Yeah.
also can't write. She can spell her name, but she's not
Yeah.
writing
Is her book
handwriting.
Lavender, or it's like
Her
scribble
her book
scroll?
is like pictures, and
Oh,
then she
so good.
narrates, and then they
Yes.
jot it down, and then they read it back to her. And I was like, it made it to the next
Yes.
generation. Like he fully understood that. And he was telling that to my daughter, his sister Johanna. Oh, Lavender's writing so many books every day. And Johanna said out loud, this was just Saturday morning,
Yeah.
and today is Tuesday. And Johanna said, "Oh, I remember making a book like that." And I said, "A book? Johanna, you made one a day for months." And I did? I said, "Yes, I've still got half of them. They're in my
I was going to say,
basement."
now is
Yeah.
she searching through your closets, throwing
So
away my books, Mom?
yes, but my kids are 37 and 35. And I think it's really important to realize that the source of their confidence started before they knew how to read. And that is a gift that you gave your child. That's a gift anyone can give their child. Transcribe their thoughts, catch them in the act of self expression. Don't ask for it. When you ask for it, it's the same pressure as asking them to write. Just catch them in the act, start jotting it down without telling them what you're doing. And then later that day, read it back to them, and they will be amazed that the thoughts they had are still living and active on paper. It's pretty exciting.
It is so exciting. And even when we think about, so obviously that's the beginnings, but you
Right.
mentioned, how so many people are concerned about if they're thinking the right thing. My daughter and I were just having this conversation. She's taking, it's called Health Career Pathways at the technical school so that she can decide if she wants to go into the medical profession or not. And right now they're doing this whole subset or section, whatever, however you call it, on medical ethics. And she said that the amount of people that are sitting around like at her table and are looking through like their notes to try to find the answer that they're supposed to give. She's, Mom, it's like ethics. You have to think about it. There's not a right or wrong. But I think we are,
Interesting.
just the way that you've been talking, we are so conditioned to, I have to give the right answer in my writing, and it belongs to the thoughts from somebody else or from the book or from whatever.
That's exactly right. And unfortunately, some of those conditions do exist. I remember
Mhm.
being in grad school, and in my very final class, after taking this program for 4 years and getting A's on all my papers, I had this one teacher who gave me an A minus on one of my papers. So I went and I talked to her. I said, I need to
You're like, I don't
understand.
want this.
I just want to understand what is the
Right.
minus. Show me what is the minus. And her literal words were, "You're putting this in your own language, and I wanted you to use my language." And I said, "Okay, that's fascinating to me because
Yeah.
literally every other professor I've had has complimented me for being able to take the ideas and translate them into meaningful language for me." And she said, "Yeah,
Right.
that's not how I think." And so I just modified the writing to match her expectations. So there are teachers like that. I'm not saying
Yeah.
they don't exist, but if that's the case, what I really want for students is a space or a time or an opportunity to not feel that pressure all the time. It's one thing to teach your kids to play the game when it needs to
Yeah.
be played, but writing is so much bigger than this. Right now, we're living in this age of AI, artificial
Right.
intelligence, chat GPT, these large language models. And a lot of students are not only relying on them, but they have ceded the right to have their own ideas. Now, those
Mhm.
tools can be super powerful. And in my new book, I even talk about ways to use Chat GPT as a student. But if a child doesn't have a strong sense of their own writing voices, they will get run over. They won't even
Yeah.
be able to defend the content that a chatbot creates for them. So
Right.
part of this inculcation of being comfortable with writing is giving them the right to their ideas, not just the physical ability to transcribe, but literally your thoughts matter. And we want to continue to celebrate that.
Hey there, homeschool parents. If you're looking for personalized support to help your child be successful in what they specifically need and want to do to occupy their time, see that word occupation in there? You are in the right place. That is the mission of Homeschool OT. Parents just like you asked for this, one-on-one support, a chance to get real answers through face-to-face Q&A sessions. It's a way to cut through the noise of the internet and get direct, personalized guidance that you can trust. With practical advice and one-on-one support, you'll have the tools and confidence for your homeschool journey. We know the busyness of homeschool families, so you can book 1, 4, 12, 24, whatever. It's on demand. So if you're ready to get started, visit homeschoolot.com/services to book your sessions. Now, back to the show. That is so beautiful. And especially, you're right, when we are thinking about how we take something, and I do this all the time. Like I'll take what my thoughts are and then I put it into ChatGPT and I'm like, oh, that sounds better. and then I take it back and I'll revise and stuff from there. But you're right. That first was my original idea. So for
Yes.
flipping that, and kids who are growing up on this may be more likely to flip it so
I
that they're
think that
taking the ideas.
I think the problem for a lot of people is they're uncomfortable with their own thought lives. So, one of the benefits of free writing, where you are transcribing your own mind, is you're doing this outside of any kind of expectation, like being graded or fulfilling an assignment.
Right.
And so you get to have this experience of externalizing your thought life and then almost being your own third party to your thoughts. You get to read them back and see how they feel and see what it feels like to express them. Using Chat GPT to shape up a draft or to impose a format you don't know. For instance, when I wrote my mother's obituary, I used Chat GPT to give me the format because
Right.
I didn't want to have to learn it. It already
Yeah.
exists. So I put in all the information. It generated a draft. I went through and edited it to make it be what I wanted it to be. That's a very valid use. On the flip side of that, I saw a whole TikTok series of women who were angry that their husbands used Chat GPT to write their vows.
Gosh.
Do you want your husband to write his vows using a chat bot?
I am not marrying the chat bot.
But if we lose confidence in
Yeah.
self-expression, that's where we go. We just start to delegate even our thoughts and our sentiments. Do I want
Yeah.
ChatGPT to write? Like, I didn't have it write the eulogy. That's coming from my heart. That's something
Right.
that I want to express based on the things I knew about my mother. I have a friend who was in the medical profession, and he was asked to write a letter of recommendation. That's a great use of ChatGPT. If you're not a natural writer and that format feels like a lot of work, there's nothing wrong with uploading all that information and letting it organize it for you. And you will, by the way, have to edit it because ChatGPT creates what they call hallucinations. These are errors where it's trying so hard to please you, it makes stuff up that isn't true. So you always want to go back and read every sentence for its truth value and make sure that it's accurate and not making up something that isn't real.
Oh, I think parents have so many extra and teachers have so many extra things to think about than the teachers of our generation. That now we have to go through and think through, okay, what is your original thought? What is not? And how can we edit and change? And how much of this are you doing? It is, and so much for our kids to learn and to think about. And for us as parent educators, to know how to shepherd that. Like, when is it okay to use Chat GPT? When is it not?
I think one of the ways to even think about this, love to tell this one story. I was talking with my dad and his best friend from college. They went to Notre Dame. My dad is 88 now, and his best friend is no longer with us, but he lived till he was 86. And the three of us were at this high school reunion of theirs, and we were sitting at the table talking. And my dad is a lawyer today, but he had been trained in aeronautical engineering, and that was what his best friend had done. And so I was talking about how they were both really great at math. And then my dad just out of the blue says, yeah, but I never liked history. I just paid Bill to write all my history papers. And I said, did you really do that, Bill? And he started laughing. He goes, oh, yeah, it was a great way to make a couple of bucks back then, 1958 or whatever. And I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, there's always been a way to get around original
Yep.
writing. When the
Hmm.
internet first came out, one of the very first comments everyone made was, oh, now students are just going to buy papers or they're just going to copy them off the internet. Yeah, that happened. People did
Hmm.
that. There is a way to not get the education that is
Right.
being offered to you. You can cheat. That
Yeah.
is available to all people. So I think we have to ask a much more fundamental question, which is, what is the value of writing? Why would we want to know how to do it? Why would it be meaningful to individuals to do it? What do you think?
Oh, man, that is such a beautiful question because I feel like we get asked that all the time. As an OT, people will say, now granted, a lot of times it's the very specifics as far as why are we handwriting?
Of
Why do
course.
we even need that?
Yep.
But then why do we need to be helping or working with our kids to get their thoughts out, right?
Yes.
Why can't they just tell me? Or why, oh, such a good question. And let's think a little bit more about this. So, what is the purpose before we actually get the pen to paper? And is there a need to actually put pen on paper?
Both of those are great questions. So, the first part of writing, if we think back to when writing originated, which is like in ancient Greek times, like
Mm.
Socrates was like, writing will ruin the world. He wanted
Really?
everything to be oral. Yes, his perspective was that if we write things down, they get solidified and we don't have the free exchange of ideas anymore. But of
Okay.
course, the other reason to write things down is so you don't forget them.
Yeah,
Like
right.
the whole record of Western civilization and
Yeah.
Eastern civilization is due to writing. I visited Machu Picchu a number of years ago with my kids, and this is an Inca ruin in Peru. And the funny thing about the Inca is they never developed a writing system. We know almost nothing about them. It's all just deduction based on observing the archaeological record. But they did have a system of counting, which they were able to detect, but there was no system for writing. And so it's their culture and who they are and everything evaporated, it vanished.
Right.
So writing is the preservation of thought so that it has a longevity, a life beyond this sort of ephemeral existence that we're in. So the
Right.
first important understanding for kids is if you want to protect your thoughts,
Your thoughts. Yeah.
they need to be written down. And that it's your thoughts we're trying to protect, not
Right.
somebody else's thoughts, right? That's where
So
it
then they take
starts.
some ownership of that.
A hundred
Like this is,
percent.
again, this goes back to your words have value and they correspond to what is written down on that paper.
One way to think about the phrase, I hate writing, is I hate my thoughts. And that
Mm.
really changes how a child hears those
Yeah.
words
Yeah.
because it is your thoughts we're talking about. Now, they could hate transcription,
Yeah.
like the holding of the pencil, the angle of the page. They could hate typing. Those
Hmm.
things are physical acts that feel hard for some kids in particular. But
Right.
if we just say, I hate writing, and we separate out the transcription skills, what are you left with? You're left with, my thoughts aren't important.
Yeah, the generation of ideas. They don't,
That's it.
that my idea didn't matter.
So, one of the ways we combat that is to help our kids start seeing their ideas as valuable. And we already talked about this jot it down strategy where
Hmm.
you catch them in the act. But another way is to help support them in the record keeping of the things that are meaningful to them. I remember my oldest son would go on these like events, let's
Hmm.
say go to Disneyland with another family or stay overnight at a boys camp or, participate in some athletic event that was really meaningful. And he would come home and be very emotional that it was over, that he didn't get to ever do it again. This was a kid who did not like journaling, free writing, any of it.
Yeah.
But I finally said to him, Noah, one way to protect those memories is to write them down right after they happen. You don't have to
Oh.
journal about everything, but
Hmm.
what if you just keep a special occasion journal? So when something big happens, you write just that much down.
Yeah.
He still has that journal. And
Does
he told
he?
me he kept adding to it in his 20s. He's in his 30s now.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just an old black and white composition book, and it has maybe, I don't know, 30 entries. over this lifetime of his. But that is the beginning of recognition, right? And
Hmm.
today, where does he spend most of his writing energy? On Reddit, of course. He's in his 30s. He's a computer programmer. He writes on Discord and Reddit. But it's because he trained himself to value the things he has to
He
say
has.
through
Mm-hmm.
valuing the things he has to say.
Yes. Yes. So one of the journals that I keep, I have one for each one of my kids, and I'll write down like when I'm thinking about something big that's happening in their life or something that I really need a hard thing that we've had to go through or any of that. And my daughter knows where they are. I told her she can't read it yet, but when they have kids, like I want to pass it down to them so that they
Beautiful.
can read it and go through our history as mother and child. And who knows what they'll do with that. But my daughter, as I don't think my boys care, they might, but I'm not sure. But my daughter has said already, she's mom, that's one of my prized possessions. And it isn't even hers yet.
Oh,
And those are my thoughts as a mother. So if she can hopefully look at those and then maybe even do the same thing or just to recognize that there are all different times during our life that we have thoughts that are different than what we did earlier, that they continue to develop.
yeah, writing is also a dialogue with yourself. So sometimes, I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me all the time. I'll have what I think is a really clear, brilliant thought while I'm out running or taking a shower. And then I go to write it. And instantly, I am aware of all the
All the,
limitations to my
uh-huh.
thinking.
Mm.
And so, one of the disciplines of writing is becoming more skilled at articulating your thinking. And I think we're in a moment in time where both the internet gave this massive opportunity. I was such a
Yeah.
internet optimist in the 90s because I was like, we're all writing all the time. Kids are writing more than they ever have in the history of
Right.
the world. Everybody was writing. And so there were these long, thoughtful blogs and email lists where we were really dissecting a whole train of thinking in dialogue with other people,
Hmm.
to me, like the dream. And then along came visual media and
Yep.
algorithms, and it's
Yep.
really changed how people think. Now, every video is a form of writing today. You
Hmm.
are composing thoughts, and they are getting preserved, and you are expressing them to an audience that can engage with them. So I
Right.
call that writing. That counts. But there is something about the act of actually using the language in written form. Speech is a lot more flexible. We start down a path, we backtrack. Writing, it codifies your thinking.
Yeah.
It makes it a little bit more crisp and sometimes less clear. And you have to actually grapple with those
Hmm.
nuances. I think it's
And go back
really
and
good.
edit.
Right.
We can edit our visual form, but you can't edit the words
No,
that just come out of my mouth or flow out of my mouth.
no, that's right.
So how can we help children or kids to develop along that route, especially if what they're used to seeing now are these really short 30-second,
Hmm.
here's my thought, boom, it's out. How do we work with them to refine that so that it can be written and codified and preserved?
It's still so important that kids read. It's something that I think parents can really encourage, but I know that parents have a hard time reading.
Mm.
Everybody
Yeah,
right now is struggling to read long form reading. It's one of the reasons I actually am a pretty big fan of Substack because it's reintroducing the idea of longer form content, 800 words. That's like reading a newspaper article. So I do like that we're heading in that direction. But learning to sit down and calm the nervous system long enough to read for more than 5 or 8 minutes is really helpful for kids and adults alike. I recommend setting aside a time each day where everybody's reading and all phones are off so that we start to develop that habit. And it
mhm.
doesn't have to be an hour. Literally
Right.
10 minutes will usually calm the nervous system and allow you to drop into focused reading. And then from there, you can build a longer amount of time. Maybe your goal is 15 or 17 minutes, but you're training your kids to actually read what language sounds like in written form because it's a little bit different than oral speech. I love to give this example. So here's the contrast between oral language and written language. So let's say you're at the supermarket, you're 12 years old, and you run into your best friend. And your best friend is, dude, did you end up going on that roller coaster at Kings Island? And you're like, oh my God, I did. It was so cool. Oh my God, was it cool? Oh, it was so cool. It was so fast. Really? And did you scream? Oh my God, totally scream. It was so scary. It was so good. You got to go. Oh, I want to go too. Okay, sounds great. And you
You
parked,
got,
okay?
you got to add in a few bras and
Few
low
bras
key
and
and
then one of those skibbies in the
yes,
toilet. Yeah.
activity.
All those Gen Z words I don't know.
Right.
But right, like you're using intonation, body language, and mostly summary, right? You're just giving a thumbs up, thumbs down using
Right.
language. Writing would be more like this. Your friend comes up to you in the supermarket. He says, "Hey, did you go on that roller coaster?" And you're like, as I climbed in the hard yellow seat, a metal bar clamped across my hip bones. I felt a thrill of fear run up my spine. The click, click, click of the cart went up the long hill, right?
Which is hysterical when you're saying it to me. But if I was reading it, I'd be like, "Ooh, really good adjectives. It's a great use of that."
That's exactly how it is. And yes, these are two different modes.
Right.
Written communication is meant to paint a visual, it's to create the videotape in your mind. And we take pleasure in the actual sound of the language. Part of
Right.
what makes reading beautiful is it's feeding the cacophony, the sonic part of your brain. So we want to read to start to build those cadences, right? Our
Yeah.
kids learn to write with those cadences because they've read them, not because we've told them to do it. I always say kids are really great at writing fiction because they've usually been read aloud to and they've
Yeah.
usually read fiction. Then we ask them to write an expository essay. They've never read a single one, and we don't understand why it sounds bad. They didn't spend 6 years reading
Reading
essays.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want your kids to learn a format, the best place to start is just reading it, a
Reading
lot
it.
of it. Yeah.
Oh, Julie, this has been so fantastic. And I know you are following up from an episode that we just did on dysgraphia,
Oh,
where
yes.
there are so many families who are listening to this who have the actual act of transcribing is very
Oof.
difficult. But there's also a piece of when that is so hard and frustrating that kids start to lose value in the whole
Mm.
opportunity to get their thoughts out. And so I feel like this episode, hopefully, is going to inspire families to, yes, that act of transcribing is important, but we don't want to think my thoughts don't matter or I hate my thoughts instead.
That's right. And in fact, just think of it as teaching two skills
Mhm.
simultaneously. We're not saying that they should never handwrite, but we're also not
Right,
saying that handwriting is the barrier to getting to
right.
your thoughts out. And I think you even said beautifully a little bit earlier, we can sometimes start by transcribing on the child's
Mhm.
behalf, right? They're doing oral communication. But then you can actually give them that oral communication as copy work or something
Yep.
to trace. And it doesn't have to be the whole 3 page story, it could
Mhm.
even just be the first two sentences. But you are actually just putting like a step in between that automaticity. You're saying,
Yep.
okay, think the thought first. Now focus exclusively on transcribing and saying the words as you are writing them. And that will start to build some momentum. It's like training wheels on a bike.
Yes. And even with longer essays, so what we did when we moved through with my son is then he would start to do talk to text on his computer,
There
and
you
then we
go.
would print that out, and then he would go through and edit by hand. So he wasn't copying it there, but was editing by hand.
Love
So
it.
he could still see the words corresponding to the page. And that is still happening. He's dysgraphic, so it's still happening now at age 13, but his thoughts are flowing more freely
Nice.
where he's not just stuck because and afraid to do it because he's afraid that he's going to have to write it. So, Julie, tell us a little bit more about your book and
Okay.
where people can find it because this is airing. What did we say, 10 days or 5 days
Five
before it
days.
actually comes
Yeah.
out? 5 more days for pre order, everyone.
Oh,
And
yeah,
then,
and I would love you to pre-order. One of the bonuses for people who pre-order, and I'll get you a link once I have it for the
perfect.
receipts, will be a free subscription to my Substack, Brave Learning with Julie Bogart. We'll give you a period of time for free just to get to know it when
Yeah.
you pre-order. And then there may be other bonuses, but today on day of recording, I don't even know what they are yet. Oh, yes, I do. I do know the other one. The other one is for your kids, actually. It is a free writing kind of journal with prompts and space to write in for parents who purchase this book. I have a brand new author website. I think it's so funny that it took me this long to create one. The website, sorry, the website is juliebogartwriter, WRITER.com. And so you can pre-order my book there. Yeah. And then, of course, there's Brave Writer with all of our curriculum and online classes and anything else that you're looking for in the field of writing and language arts.
So many options. Thank you so much for being here and for joining me. And I know that families are going to take a lot away from this conversation.
Thank you for the work you do, Sarah. It's good work.
Thank you. Hey there, OTs and listeners. You guys, do you want to help kids develop stronger thinking and writing skills because you know that they are very linked? Well, we have just the thing for you. Our latest handout, which is Narration, A Path to Thoughtful Learning, dives into Charlotte Mason and Karen Glass's timeless approach to narration, a powerful method where kids retell what they've learned in their very own words. It's not just about memory, but it's about connecting ideas and building communication skills that lead to better writing. You'll get practical steps to guide children from oral narration to written expression, plus a special nod to Julie Bogart's Jot It Down program, who happens to be an OT as in guest on episode 56. This all helps you to capture the ideas while kids find their voice. So if you're ready to empower your young learners, download your copy today and help kids turn their thoughts into words. You can find it at homeschoolot.com in the shop. You guys, it's not lost on me that you could be spending your time anywhere. So thank you for being here with me for the OT is In podcast.